This is The Weekly Set, the official podcast of TVEnthusiast.com. With your host, Tyson Gifford and William Roerick. Episode 130, recorded October 19th, 2017. Hello, everybody, and welcome to The Weekly Set, the official podcast of TVEnthusiast.com. I am your host, the editor-in-chief of TV Enthusiast. My name is Tyson, and joining me today, as always, is my partner in crime here at TVE and The Weekly Set, William Roerick.
Hello.
So, today we are going to be talking about Mr. Robot again. We're also going to talk a little bit about Stranger Things, the first episode of the first season, so not spoilers for anything out of that. And we're going to cover a little bit of news, and that's where we're going to start. We have three news stories. First off, they released a trailer for The Punisher, a new trailer, and announced the release date of November 17th. So, what did you think of the trailer?
I'm sorry, the trailer for The Punisher?
Yeah, the new one.
Awesome. Yeah, it's awesome.
I didn't like it as much as the last one. I don't think it was cut as well.
Well, the last one was pretty damn good, so...
Yeah, the last one was really good. One of the best trailers I've seen in a long time.
It's still good. This one still got me pretty hyped for The Punisher. I'm glad they announced the release date. I'm glad it's soon. It's November.
They're using the song again, the same song. And I noticed that in this trailer they used the melody part of the song, that da 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 da, like in the same way that they were in Defenders. They were using the "Come As You Are" riff, in the trailer for the Defenders. They were doing that.
Yep. Which I think ended up making it into the actual show.
Yeah, I mean, this would make even more sense to be in The Punisher than Come As You Are in the Defenders, because the song is all about like military, anyways.
Right, totally.
But yeah, I didn't like it as much as the first trailer. Like, it's not like super memorable and stuff, but there was one big thing about the trailer that I absolutely adored, and that's that it made me finally feel like really secure in the show, being what I wanted it to be. Because you get more story element now, and they're like, yeah, okay, they are doubling down on the whole like government conspiracy military kind of angle of it, which is like, that's what I wanted them to do, and I'm so glad that that's what it looks like it is.
That's definitely what the first trailer indicated too, so.
But even more so here, I think. Like, they really kind of spelled out what the storyline is, like what the premise is for the season. So I'm excited about that. But yeah, it's coming November 17th. We talked a few weeks ago, I believe, about how it had been delayed and it was supposed to be at New York Comic Con, and it was pulled from the schedule because of the Las Vegas shooting. And some people thought like, oh God, they're going to delay this to like next year or something. But I thought this was going to be coming around this time anyways, around November 17th or 20 something. That's when I thought this series was going to drop in the first place. So to me, it's like,
that was your original prediction.
To me, it's like falling kind of like right around where I expected it to, if not a little bit early. Next up, speaking of Netflix shows, Netflix at their quarterly earnings, the CEO, Reed Hastings, said that they could be spending up to $8 billion next year on original programming. This is just like, it's epic, but like almost like laughable, like how insane that is.
Right.
$8 billion. It's like just absurdist in like this like wonderful way. But it also ties back into that recent episode of South Park where they had the Netflix, you're greenlit. Who am I speaking to?
Exactly. Netflix, you're greenlit.
But yeah, so Netflix is going to be popping out originals like crazy. I also think that this doesn't just mean they're putting out more originals, but I think they're getting into more expensive originals. I think, Stranger Things Season 2, if you look at it, looks quite a bit more expensive than Season 1, just looking at the effects going on and stuff. And I think, if Season 2 holds up, Season 3 is probably going to be another big step up in budget for that show. And then you have, like, The Witcher. I don't think there is a way to do that right without putting a pretty hefty budget forward. They don't have to put, like, Game of Thrones level budget, but you're still going to need a pretty hefty budget for a show like that.
Like Netflix said they want to have 50% of their output be original programming.
And they're getting there quickly.
Because, as we're saying, content providers are pulling their content. Disney, right after they announced the big deal with Netflix, Netflix, where all their content was going to be Netflix, then turned around and said nope, and is pulling their content from Netflix to launch their own streaming service. And you're seeing other content providers doing that. I think NBC, no, it was either NBC or Fox. I think it was Fox recently pulled a bunch of content off of Netflix to put it on Hulu.
I think one of the dumb things about this, one of the things that they need to understand, is they need to look at like the recent numbers of, and I don't know if you've even heard about this, but the recent numbers tied to Riverdale. Riverdale did okay in its first season. It just did pretty good. Then it was on Netflix because of that deal the CW has where it went up like a week after, and it just like took off like crazy. The second season had 4 times the ratings of the first.
Right, yeah.
That's what the networks need to be paying attention to, is that Netflix is the great place to catch up on these shows you're watching, and instead of holding your content hostage to like another paywall of your own service. I mean, with Hulu, that's a different thing. That's available. There's plenty of stuff to make that worthwhile, but to do like a CBS all access type bullshit of their own to try to hold back the stuff is going to keep people from catching up on these shows.
Right, exactly.
They're not, I think that that's the real value for these companies from Netflix, isn't so much the fee that Netflix pays to license these shows, but the catch-up factor of, people catching up on these shows. At the end of the day, and I think I've said this before and you agreed, is that when I think about Netflix now, I think about originals. That's the only thing I think about. Like, I might watch stuff that's not, Netflix originals, but like when I go like, oh, what's on Netflix? Like it might not even occur to me to think of things like The Good Place or something that you caught up on Netflix, but I might not even that might not even occur to me to bring that up. Like I'd just be like, oh, Stranger Things, House of Cards, Orange is the New Black. I'd just be going off their originals because they have so many now that it's like you can get lost in just talking about their originals.
Right.
So yeah, 8 billion. That's, geez.
Yeah, I mean,
that's going to be huge.
Netflix is smart.
Yeah, I think that's also going to be a lot more movies because they've been pushing in that direction too. With they have that new one coming out with Will Smith in November. Bright, that's like modern kind of fantasy movie or something. And then they've done a few here and there like little movies. I think they're going to step that up too and be going to higher budget features as well, in the same way that like Amazon's been kind of pushing.
Right. I think they're going to do that. Speaking of Amazon, big scandal there with their director, their head of programming, Roy Price.
Yeah, he's already been ousted.
He's been ousted. Apparently, this guy was a giant pig, and funny enough, he was friends with Harvey Weinstein.
Yeah.
Apparently, he made like really stupid decisions that really hurt Amazon. The decisions that he made based out of being misogynist pig, like
Big Little Lies.
Big
where
Little
he
Lies.
wanted all the stars to show their breast and Big Little Lies.
Yeah, he wanted all the stars to show it. Asked, why should I purchase this unless the stars are showing their tits? And it won HBO 13 Emmys.
Yeah.
And Amazon got nothing.
What's kind of ironic about this is that most of the originals that have like really taken off on Amazon are that kind of like woke category that we talked about before, that was like kind of their niche.
Right.
It's stuff like Transparent and One Mississippi. And it's all this stuff that's like very liberal, heavily liberal.
The article I read really pointed out that most of Netflix's recent content is male oriented. Bosch.
Amazon, you mean?
Amazon, yeah. Most of Amazon's recent content is very male-oriented.
It's also targets an older audience, I think. I know my dad's like big on Amazon originals.
Right. And there's like there's not a lot of female-led content. There's obviously there's Transparent, which has a female showrunner. But I also note in the article that several male showrunners had their projects picked up straight to series by Amazon. Whereas,
that's true.
Whereas no female showrunners, even the creator Transparent pitched another show to Amazon, and they put that in development rather than straight to series.
That on another pilot season. That was that I Love Dick show with Kevin Bacon.
Yeah, that was that I Love Dick show. Yeah, that's right.
And Transparent is the one original that's really made a name for them.
Right. Yeah, it's like if you mention Amazon shows, I'm sure that Transparent is at like the top of everybody's mind. mind when you
It's
mention
the one that wins
their
like
programming.
Emmys and stuff, you know.
Yeah,
It's
it's the one that wins awards. So this guy was clearly disgusting and an idiot. I'm glad he's gone. I hope that Amazon can turn it around now and we can get some better, more diverse programming out of them. But I think for a while, I think certainly on this podcast we were wondering just what the hell was up with Amazon. And I think we got at least part of the answer.
Yeah, we got part of it, but not the whole thing. But
yeah,
it's just so interesting because the stuff that's done really well for Amazon, like I said, is like it's their kind of like woke content. It's stuff like Transparent and One Mississippi that are very super liberal, super progressive. And those are the shows that are like winning them awards and getting like word of mouth spread. But like you said, all the shows kind of in that category all went through pilot season. And then, I guess ironically, or not really ironically, but kind of seems obvious now, Woody Allen was pushed forward with a straight to series order. $80 million and it flopped. Yeah, and he even said it. He said it was going to suck, like, when he was making it. Like, he was basically like, they kept throwing money at him, and he said, fine.
Oh, my God. So he wasn't even enthusiastic about it,
Yeah, I think we're just going to see, like, we're going to go over the list of all the stuff that went straight to series, and it's all going to be from people that are, like, all the expensive stuff is all going to be from, like, other misogynist producers that are, like, now in trouble.
Yeah,
because Harvey Weinstein, like you mentioned, tied to that as well. He had a show in development at Amazon that was going to have Robert De Niro in the lead. That was like this really high budget show coming to Amazon.
Yep.
And now that's not happening.
Nope. Now that's not happening. It's kind of amazing. It's amazing.
Which is a little sad because it would be kind of amazing to see a Robert De Niro series.
Oh, it would.
But yeah, the company he kept in that meeting or in that project, not so great.
No, not so great at all. It's amazing to me because, like, not only was this reprehensible behavior, certainly, but it was negatively affecting their business.
Yep.
And yet they tolerated it. It's mind-blowing.
The first thing I heard when they got rid of him, and I said, oh, okay, well, regardless of the angle of the sexism and stuff, that's just a good move.
Yeah, because his fucking attitudes was causing him to make poor business decisions and waste company money by the million. So it was just a good move all around, and hopefully they get somebody more competent for the position and we start getting better programming on Amazon because they certainly need it, because right now Amazon's falling behind Hulu right now, and that's something that shouldn't be happening.
I think if they're smart, they're going to start snooping around like FX and AMC and start looking for some of their executives.
Yeah, I think so. If they're smart.
Because I think that's kind of what Amazon's going to want, is some stuff along those lines. So let's see here. And the last news story we have is, hey, did you know there's another CW DC show coming?
The 800th. They should rename CW DCW.
Yeah, pretty much. It's the DC channel.
Yeah, DC channel. There you go. It's basically what it is. DC with DC and Archie. Why not? There you go.
But yeah, this series is called Project 13, and it's a perfect fit for TV because it's like a supernatural exploration series that they can do episode of the week storylines with.
Oh yeah, it's totally gonna be. The setup is totally procedural, has supernatural element. I mean, the premise basically sounds like X-Files,
but with the added benefit that the characters have the last name 13.
Yeah, it's the X-Files, but instead of Mulder and Scully, you have a daughter and a father, so it's a daughter-father relationship
with the name 13. With the name their last name is me.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is such a procedural TV thing. That's like the kind of thing you just totally see in procedurals,
Yeah.
Where it's like, it's a police show and it's called Cuffs, and the guy's name is John Cuffs.
Toppest cop in Detroit. It's like, yeah, okay.
Yeah. It's like such like a common thing that they have like the person's name in the title, but the name is like just a word that's also related to it. Like that kind of like weird wordplay a procedural TV thing. So it's like, yeah, that fits in. Except the fact that it's just so absurd because who has the name 13? I mean, never have I ever heard somebody with a last name that's a number. So this series is going to be produced by Elizabeth Banks and Max Handelman, both from Pitch Perfect, and it's going to be, the showrunner is Dagan Freikland, very, very strangely spelled name. I probably got that wrong. Who did the sci-fi series Bitten, which was a werewolf series that starred the girl who played Supergirl in Smallville. She was like the lead in that show.
Okay, I know what you're talking about. Okay, I remember this show now.
I think I saw like one episode. I just wasn't that into it. But yeah, so that's Project 13, another DC show. One name conspicuously missing is Mark Guggenheim, who does all of the CW DC shows, as well as Archie and some other shows on other channels like Blind Spot on NBC. He's was kind of being seen as like the CW Shonda Rhimes.
Right.
Because he was like producing everything, and especially on the DC stuff, all the Arrowverse stuff. His name not listed here at all in any of the stories. That doesn't mean he's not involved. It's just that they didn't state his name. They didn't announce him as being involved. So I don't know if that means this is not going to be Arrowverse, but in the comics, I've been involved in like Flash and Batman storylines. So you could see it happening either way. We'll see. Imagine if it's not successful, they'll like throw in some reference to tie it into, like in the back nine, all of a sudden they'll be talking about a guy named Barry Allen in Central City or something. And then the next season, if it lasts that long, they'll like, add it to the crossover.
Right.
But that's the news. Moving on from that, I just started today rewatching Stranger Things. I'm watching an episode a day to catch up for the 27th when the new season is premiering on Netflix. So we didn't really talk about season 1 on the podcast. I mean, we talked about liking it and stuff, but we were going to do like a full episode discussion of it, and we just didn't get around to it because we got busy with other stuff. So I thought this was a good time to kind of talk a little bit about Stranger Things. So on my rewatch, I only watched the first episode. But yeah, I just kind of wanted to go over some things about the first episode that I'm kind of, noticing from watching it again. And that's, the main thing I kind of took away is that I remembered Benny that owned the diner that Eleven like broke into, and he was like feeding her.
Yeah,
and I remembered how quickly I became attached to that character, and he dies in the first episode.
Yeah, like I always say, one of the hallmarks of a great TV series is characterization. If they can make you care about the characters, you're good. And the fact that right off the bat, Stranger Things manages to make you care about such a minor character who doesn't even have a lot of screen time so quickly like that, to the point where you're disappointed when he dies, is just that's just fantastic characterization. You're watching a good show at that point. Because most TV shows can't even make you care about their leads. It's like, I see a lot of TV shows where, the leads are just flat and boring. So and Stranger Things does that with all their characters, to be honest. You actually care about the kids. That's just how good it is.
Yeah, it's a great show. But one thing I am noticing is that the characters aren't represented, most of them aren't represented the best in the first episode. And that's intentional. It's not like a mistake on the show. Like Hooper, the sheriff, is kind of like an asshole in the first episode.
I guess it's because, I did view that first episode thinking, yeah, Cooper's an asshole, but he's going to be like the lovable, the grumpy guy with a heart of gold.
He's going to be our asshole.
Our asshole. You can already tell he's the grumpy asshole with the heart of gold who you're going to love.
Eleven is already endearing in the first episode, largely with her interactions with Benny. The other kids are a bit obnoxious in the first episode because they're, besides 11, like I said, but that's intentional, as they're trying to kind of show them as being immature, just kids that are in the situation, and they grow through this experience. I believe when I watched the original series, it was like episode 4 that really hooked me. Like I was into the show anyways, so I was going to watch it all anyways, but it was around episode 4 where I was like, okay, this show is really good. I'm seeing that still, but now I know, having seen the whole series, and it gives me a different perspective to like watch it and go like, okay, they're kind of portraying these characters a little bit differently, and it's not necessarily like a bad thing. It's not like they're portraying them poorly in a way that shows that the series isn't good or something. They're specifically portraying them with like one scope that you see them through, and then they're expanding it as the series goes on, as you become more and more attached to the characters. But I think it's interesting that they put a lot of their focus on the characters that have kind of not had a lot of screen time. So there's a lot of characters that kind of like, they're just kind of briefly in it, and those are the characters that I think you really go like, oh, that guy's really nice, or that, you know, things like that. The characterization like that is happening with these really kind of small characters right now. And then it kind of expands more because you have more time to get to know the main characters.
Right, exactly.
So yeah, that's Stranger Things. I'm rewatching it. I'll talk about it next week because I'll have finished rewatching the series by the time we do the podcast next week. It's only 8 episodes. But I'm going to now move us on to Mr. Robot. This is episode 2 of season 3, titled episode 3.1 Undo.gz.
Oh, yeah. And boy, is this a great episode. From the moment it opened, it just hits the ground running and doesn't stop. I love the opening where he's going to work at E-Corp, and he's determined that he is going to fix everything from the inside.
He's just slowly getting people arrested.
It's fucking hilarious because he goes in there and he comes up with this plan to save the data in case the physical copies get blown up. He wants to have a backup copy of the data. And so he's trying to get the executives to sign off on this. And he keeps going to his bosses and like, they don't give a shit. And they don't give a shit. So, you know, they give him like some bullshit response like, oh, you know, and then he turns around and his response is to get them arrested, and is to get them arrested.
Not like getting them falsely arrested. He's like exposing them.
Yeah, he's like exposing. He's looking for something to get them on, and like just so he could get like the next person in the chain until he finds somebody who will listen to him.
So that was really funny. I love how it's presented. It has like a very like season 1 feel to it, in that it's kind of more of like the adventure of kind of like this hacking movement, you know, before you get into kind of like the psychological part of this character being crazy, you know.
I also loved like the part on like the train where like everybody's heads were emojis.
Yeah. It shows a little bit like a manic depressive streak or bipolar streak in Elliot, because you have this moment where that turns.
Yeah, you do.
And then you see it worse again. And I noted this for myself as being like a really kind of big moment, was when he was visiting his therapist, and he kind of casually brought up about how he was pushed out the window by his father as a child.
Right.
And you kind of like see like horror kind of hit her face.
Right.
She's like kind of like, what? You were pushed out the window? And this kind of like horror is this perfectly natural reaction that doesn't match like Elliot just kind of smiling and talking about it really lightly.
Right.
And
yeah.
you kind of see like as she starts talking to him about that this is something he didn't tell her about, and that this is like something important to talk about. And you can see his face go from the smile to kind of like it starts to drip, and then he kind of puts on a forced smile, like, and then that kind of starts to break down too.
Like he didn't realize the gravity. He related it like it was just like a funny childhood story, you know?
And it didn't hit him clearly until that point.
Right.
And it took a while too. Like he had this fake smile that came up, and that kind of worked away too. And so I was like, oh God, like that scene was just really well done, really well acted with both of the actors in the scene, and the way they kind of handled kind of like shocking kind of moment that we were already privy to. This isn't like a revelation to the audience, but it's it's
kind of like a revelation that Elliot doesn't consider it some great traumatic event, or at least didn't until he brought it up. Like, he didn't see it that way.
And that's a big part of this whole episode, is that you have these kind of things with both Elliot and Darlene, where you see how their childhoods kind of connect to each other, because they're siblings, but also kind of how it like creates like a division between them, and how it's like, it's both warm memories, but it's also like there's something kind of dark there underneath as well.
Right, totally. And we get, like, Elliot also, like, has a breakdown in the middle. His loneliness returns, which is,
that's kind of when everything kind of started falling apart, like we went from this that's like I had said, Elliot we're seeing like this bipolar side of Elliot, because we saw him just all happy, and like you said, with the emojis, as he was like, taking down all these people and advancing himself in E-Corp, and it was very adventurous and fun to watch. And then you kind of see like that unsettling, like, part of his character like seep into that and ruin it for him.
Well, it's very realistic depiction of, it's a very realistic to me depiction of bipolar and depression, because that's the way you do. You feel fine. You feel fine one moment, or for a while you feel perfectly fine, and then all of a sudden, practically out of the blue, you don't feel fine anymore. You have this breakdown.
And for Elliot, he literally just sat in front of his computer to log in at work.
Yeah.
And like, I was watching with my mom, and she was like, "Oh, he got locked out or something?" And I'm like, "No, he's just it's just like that other side of the pendulum of his bipolar thing just hit him."
Right.
Now he's like on the depression end, and he's getting that aspect of it. And it was, it's what the show has been doing really well in the second season, brought into what the show did really well in its first season.
Right.
So like the first season was all about kind of like the manic side of the manic depression. The second season was all about like the depression side of the manic depression. And now the third season is like both.
Yeah, the third season is like both.
It's the manic depression side of the of the whole. So you're getting this kind of like the parallels of it. So you're getting this kind of like the fun and adventure and all the mania that comes along with him like doing these things, and then you start to get like the crushing depression.
Well, you see that also in like the larger narrative of like Elliot thought that bringing down E-Corp would make him happy.
Mm-hmm.
That it would be like this great thing that he would done to help humanity, very important mission, and he thought he'd find some happiness and satisfaction in it. And now we're seeing, in the aftermath, that he finds no satisfaction in it. He doesn't, he didn't get out of it what he thought he was going to get. So now he's trying to find satisfaction in fixing it.
So we had a good shocking scene in this episode where we see Tyrell Relic's wife, Joanna, doing a TV interview. And she's talking about how she always loved her husband and she filed for divorce, but that was like a moment of weakness because of everything that was going on. She talks about how she doesn't talk about how she set up the one guy to take the fall for killing his own wife, the guy the wife that Tyrell actually killed.
Right.
But she talks about the fact that he had done it. And so it's kind of cueing back into stuff we knew about from the first season. And that was kind of briefly brought up in the second season as well. And we see how she's kind of put the cap on taking that guy down in Tyrell's place. And so she does this TV interview, and then she's on her way back home with her driver who's like protecting her. And they notice they're getting followed by her boyfriend, the one that she was sleeping with in the second season. And so the driver steps out and kind of basically threatens him and says,
if you tells him to get lost.
Yeah, says that if you keep coming after her, you're going to die. If you release this information, you're going to die. Basically saying, we're going to kill you, but without saying that he's going to do it, Right. And he gets back in the car. He's telling Joanna, everything's fine. I'm going to take off. And then boom,
he gets shot. He gets shot.
And you see it's her boyfriend that did it. And then even more shockingly, she leans forward to grab his gun and to try to like shoot back at him.
Right.
And boom, she's hit straight in the head. Dead.
She's dead.
Yeah.
You weren't expecting that, were you?
And then another twist in that moment. Driver's still
still
alive, just
alive.
long enough to shoot the guy.
Man,
So just 3 dead on a scene, a crying baby in a car covered in blood.
what a hard-hitting scene. That was like, wow, shit.
Yeah, it was kind of impactful and surprising. I didn't expect them to take out Joanna that quickly.
No, I didn't either. I guess her story was done, basically, because,
He was so ruthless in like the first 2 seasons, so it's kind of like crazy how quickly
it is kind of crazy
he
how
got taken out of it.
got taken out, yeah.
But what's interesting here is that not only did this big dramatic event happen, but then you see how the FBI handled it.
Yeah.
Which is basically, oh yeah, we're not going to release this information to the public.
Well, they're keeping it on download because,
And not only that, but we're going to drop the baby and protect it and not in social services.
Yeah.
Instead of returning her to her next
because they don't want Tyrell Willick finding out. About
which
this.
is just cold.
It's just cold.
Cold
it's
as
mostly,
hell.
it's mostly like the guy there, the female agent, like she starts and and he basically cuts her off and says, "Don't get soft on me,"
Yeah, that guy's an asshole.
Yeah.
We've seen him also when he was talking to Darlene. He's just like hot-headed and mean.
Yeah, he's just in
his approach. He's definitely plays a bad cop role.
And I also get the impression he's also kind of an idiot. Like he's a little bit clueless. Like his partner there, the female, she's a lot more intelligent. She notices stuff and connects the dots way better than he does.
Well, she's able to see that this is Dark Army.
Yeah.
And he's like just not seeing that at all. And that could be that he's not as smart. It could also go a little bit more sinister and say that he's got some connection to Dark Army.
Oh, it might be.
And he's just kind of pushing her off.
Dark Army's kind of got their hands everywhere, right? Speaking of Dark Army, we have we got a good scene with like the larger power struggle that was happening.
Yeah, between Philip Price and Zhang, also known as White Rose.
White Rose, the leader of Dark Army, and the president of E-Corp, who
that's Philip Price.
Basically, Wang and the Chinese government, they want the UN to sign off on a proposal for China to control the Congo or parts of it.
Mm-hmm.
Something about China and the Congo, and
it's a UN proposal.
It's a UN proposal. Price wants to push eCoin as the new world currency to replace to replace all the currencies of the world. Everybody's going to use eCoin, and China just won't sign off on it, and that sticks in his craw pretty bad. And
so Price kind of calls out Zhang, like right in like a meeting in front of everybody, not by name, but like talking about China, basically calls out China and saying China. It's like an attack by China on, the world economy and all this stuff, just going after them, purposely to get Zhang to basically force Zhang to go and see him and talk to him. And so Zhang, looking rather furious, ends up visiting him, says, he only came here because he was like passing through anyways or something. But he is not happy with Price. And Price makes the demand that, you're going to sign off on this or your vote's going to go away.
Yeah.
And Zhang says, let me fill you in on a little something. And he starts talking about his connection now to Angela, who had become important to Philip Price.
Yep.
And how he kind of has Angela's ear now.
Yeah.
And uses that against Price, and then adds in one of the best quotes I've heard in a long time, which is, "Don't mistake my generosity for generosity."
Yeah. Yeah, I just love what it said. Yeah, like Zhang is definitely a freaking scary dude.
And then Zhang talks to his subordinate and basically says, let's get state to commence on the day of the vote, whether they win or lose.
Yeah, whether it goes my way or not. And he's like, well, the whole point was, the whole point of this was, so that you would, the whole point of all this was to scare Price into making sure that the vote goes their way. And he's saying,
and now he's just basically saying screw Price.
Yeah, he's basically like, oh, fuck him. I'm gonna fuck him over either way because he's an asshole. It's basically. Yeah,
he's like, I'm done with Price, and this is my way of saying you're out.
Yeah, this is my way of saying you're out. Exactly.
Which is kind of like you saw in season 2. We saw that scene where Zhang, as White Rose in drag, peed on a grave. and, you know, like was kind of being very disrespectful. And you're like, okay, what's this about? And you find out it was the previous CEO of E Corp. And he talks about how he ruined him to the point that it drove him to his death. Just completely and utterly ruined him. And how Price and him had a conversation where he was like, don't mistake me for being like that previous CEO. I'm ruthless too. I'm part of this game too. I'm not somebody that can just be pushed and forced to death, basically, like this other guy had been. So this is like all kind of like directly parallels that you have this kind of moment now where Zhang has decided, okay, well, I'm done with Price. Time to do basically what he did to the last CEO of E Corp. Push him, in his mind, to his death.
Right, exactly.
We had a good scene where we found out that, or not found out, but Elliot went to his therapist again and told her that he wanted her to meet Mr. Robot. To like bring Mr. Robot forward and to meet this element of personality. Great kind of scene between him, very intimidating. With Mr. Robot playing. I love the shot of him standing kind of over her as like Christian Slater and then kind of backing out of frame, and then you just see Elliot sitting down and he's like, well, when do we get started?
Oh yeah, that was freaking great. They did like a couple good things with Mr. Robot this episode. Couple different things, like that scene was amazing. It was so tense because you didn't know what the hell Mr. Robot was going to do.
Yeah.
Like you didn't know what he's liable to do. That was tense. There was also another scene, and again, this is kind of like some new things they've been doing, where Darlene spent the night with Elliot upon Elliot's request, and she's working with the FBI. So she gets on Elliot's computer, and she does something while she thinks Elliot is asleep, and then it turns out Elliot catches her, and and he starts interrogating her about it, and she's like, it's nothing. I'm just writing a note, and she's trying to leave, and Elliot's getting more and more aggressive, and then she realizes, and then you realize at the same time, it's not Elliot, it's Mr. Robot. Except this time they didn't show Christian Slater until after Darlene realized who it was, and the viewer comes to a realization at the same time as Darlene, and that's really the first time. And that's really the first time they did something like that with that, the whole duality, to where previously every time Elliot was Mr. Robot, you clearly knew who he was, and this time they left it ambiguous to make the scene more tense.
It's probably the first time we've really seen Mr. Robot as portrayed by Rami Malek.
Yes. That was a really cool scene too.
Yeah, and Mr. Robot is convinced that they're compromised, that she's compromised him.
Yes.
And he's right. he's crazy and evil, but he's right.
And now we also have
they've been compromised.
And we also have now this kind of duality, because up until now, Elliot and Mr. Robot's goals have been pretty much in sync. In season 1, Elliot wanted to take down E Corp just like Mr. Robot.
Yeah, it's more like the methods that have differed a little.
Their methods have differed a little. In season 2, Elliot was in prison. He was trying to get rid of Mr. Robot, so he was like, they had this opposition, but Mr. Robot ended up being in a position where he had to keep Elliot alive and safe. And now we just have full on. Elliot's the protagonist, Mr. Robot is the antagonist, and their goals are completely diametrically opposed. Elliot is trying to stop the Wave 2 attack that Mr. Robot is trying to execute. And it's interesting because now we have the main character, Elliot, as both the antagonist and the protagonist. And and again, I was thinking about that as a work. I was like, damn, that's something.
Just more mindfuckery.
Yeah, more mindfuckery for the audience. Yeah, exactly. Because, how do you stop yourself?
And that brings us to the end of the episode where Elliot realizes Darlene bugged his computer. He uses a thumb drive with an alternate boot of Linux and is able to kind of do some work that way. Ends up kind of creating a program, sends it as a link, knowing that the FBI was watching his stuff and that by doing that, they would basically expose their location to him.
Well, you said Elliot did that, but that would be more like Mr. Robot did that.
But we're not sure.
We're not
yet.
sure.
Like you said, there's kind of a point of confusion there.
There's a point of confusion because now they're kind of playing with it, so we don't know. So now they're kind of playing with the idea of like, okay, do you know who's Mr. Robot and who's Elliot?
Yeah.
You know what times. And I think Mr. Robot did that because Mr. Robot is the one who discovered Darlene messing with the computer in the first place, not Elliot. And Elliot seems to be oblivious, so...
Yeah, but so now Elliot or Mr. Robot, it's Elliot either way, as a person.
Yeah.
He's, he's done that now to figure out the FBI's thing. We learn this because we see that the female FBI agent go in and she's with like a tech or something that's in the FBI that's with her basically watching Elliot's computer. Like as Darlene bugged it, he's watching over it. They're upstairs in a building with Darlene in the downstairs apartment. She said she was going away and upstate to stay with a friend, but she's staying in protective custody in a safe house. And they're like right above it. They notice like somebody's breaking into the downstairs apartment. That's Darlene's apartment. And they're like, who is it? And we as the audience know because we see a hoodie.
Right.
The black hoodie, which is like, which is Elliot's superhero costume.
It is, I believe it is Mr. Robot.
Yeah, and then you see him in that hoodie breaking in. He walks into Darlene's apartment, takes off the hoodie, exposing his face, which could be construed as like, oh, he's stupidly exposed himself in this.
No.
But I think this is him basically telling the FBI he wants to talk.
Right.
So whether he's Mr. Robot or not, he wants to talk to the FBI, whether that means that he's going to, if he's Elliot, if he's going to give up information, or if he's Mr. Robot, if he's going to try to confuse them or cause problems for them. He needs to be directly connected to them, which is something that they've been avoiding because they think it would spook him and cause him not to expose where Tyrell is, who they're really after. Like his way of saying, okay, game's up. I know. I'm standing right in the safe house that you're holding for her. I know exactly where you guys are. And kind of ending that game. So it's going to go into an interesting place for going forward here if Elliot's going to be openly talking to the FBI now.
Right. Totally.
But yeah, that's Mr. Robot. Still good. Still watching. Episode 3 of season 3 will be next week, and we'll talk about that. But here's what's coming up in the week ahead. On Friday, October 20th, 2017, which will be today by the time you can listen to this podcast, Red Oaks is back on Amazon. Tracy Ullman Show is back on HBO. And The Day I Met El Chapo hits Netflix. That's, like I said last week, Netflix doubling down on their cartel dramas. Then this Sunday, October 22nd, 2017, The Walking Dead is back on AMC, and Graves is back on Epix. Then on Tuesday, October 24th, 2017, The Last OG debuts on TBS. This is Tracy Jordan, right? It's his show, his new series on TBS. And At Home with Amy Sedaris debuts on True TV. This is meant to look like do you know who Amy Sedaris is?
The name is familiar. Yeah, I know who that is. Strangers with Candy.
Yes.
Okay.
This is her new show where she's playing like a Martha Stewart-like person, like whose just like a complete mess. And so it's like this like kind of dark comedy version of like Martha Stewart.
Right.
And then Wanted comes to Netflix. This is I believe like it's a German series. And then Friday, October 27th, 2017, next Friday, Blind Spot comes back to NBC. But more importantly, Stranger Things Season 2 begins on Netflix. And that's it for what's coming up in the week ahead. You can reach me.
Exciting.
Yeah, you can reach me on Twitter. I'm at Tyson Gifford. You can reach Will. He is at Voxel Hero. You can check out our Facebook page and our YouTube channel, as well as our site, TVEnthusiast.com. You can subscribe to the podcast through any major podcast client like iTunes or Pocket Cast. And the entire backlog of our podcast is available on our YouTube channel. So until next week, when we talk about episode 3 of season 3 of Mr. Robot. Good night.
Good night.
If you would like to voice your opinion, send an email to theweeklyset@TVEnthusiast.com. TV Enthusiast is a part of the Enthusiast Media Network. Stay tuned to TV Enthusiast and the Weekly Set podcast for more coverage of all of